You ready?
Let's just go.
Remember back in '02 when I was in school and acting a fool, my soul got saved.
Now, Lecrae, don't laugh at me for making a statement about hip-hop music, okay? But I gotta say that the most interesting or amazing thing about hip-hop, to me, is that it allows you to say things poetically,
Sure.
put to music,
Okay. Yeah.
at twice the speed of normal conversation.
Yeah. Not only
So everybody else is trying to write with brevity a poem, but you guys, you get to cram in twice as much
Sure.
to
Yes.
get your message out.
Well, you know, when you have 4 minutes to make sure you hit all the points you want to hit, then so you have to get creative. So.
And you develop an ear, because I know I've listened to a lot in the last couple of days,
Look
just
at you.
preparing, and I'm telling you, it's starting to get sticky. It's sticking.
You start to understand that?
Yeah, but it's an art form.
Yeah.
It's an
Wow.
art form, right? It's a very distinctive art form, and you have used it to say some very painful, raise issues about your own life, about issues of public concern, particularly about abortion
Sure.
and sexual abuse as a young man that you underwent, and promiscuity, and how all these things come together. They come together particularly in your song "Good, Bad, Ugly."
Right.
Can you rap the first verse for us?
Let's see. I remember back in '02. Oh my goodness.
There it is, right there.
Okay, yeah. I remember back in '02, I was in school and acting a fool. My soul got saved, my debt had been paid, but still I kept running off with my crew. Sex on my brain and death in my veins. I had a main thing, we stayed up to 2, smoking. Waking and baking, we naked. My body was loving it, soul was hating it. And time after time, our bodies grew close. The girl was so fine. She had a heart, we heard a heartbeat that wasn't hers or mine. The miracle of life had started inside. Ignored the warning signs, suppressed that truth I felt inside. I was just having fun with this. I'm too young for this. I'm thinking me, myself, and I. Should I sacrifice this life to keep my vanity and live nice? But she loves and trusts me so much that whatever I say, she'll probably oblige. But I was too selfish with my time. Scared my dreams were not gonna survive. So I dropped her off at that clinic. That day a part of us died. So, yeah.
And it's true.
It's a true story, yeah. I mean, it's kind of all, young man trying to figure out what I was gonna do with my life. Hadn't finished school, and I had met the Lord, but just was still trying to get my footing in terms of walking with Jesus, and I could tell all kind of. There's so much that happened. Like I literally was in the middle of that relationship. I was feeling the conviction. I felt like God was giving me opportunities to, escape. And we're doing drugs. We're engaged in sexual activity consistently. And I really, at that time, I thought that I had believed an urban myth that if you consume enough drugs, you will be sterile. And so I just, thought that, we'll never get pregnant because, I was my ignorance at the time. I remember we were both working at a at a call center, and we went out for our smoke break, and she hesitated to smoke the cigarette, and I was just kind of like, what's going on? And that's when she let me inform me, that she was pregnant, and so it was a really. I will say I was had it not been for the spirit of who I was suppressing, the conviction of the spirit with drugs and alcohol, I don't know if I would have felt anything. I was so callous and so hard-hearted that it was almost second nature to say, we're going to get an abortion. And she was actually wrestling with the idea. I could sense the Lord impressing upon me like, hey, not okay. But I was like, you know, I'm so self-centered at this point in time and not God-centered at all that it was just kind of like, let me shut in that. And it wasn't even a question. It was just more of me convincing her that this was the right thing to do. And there's a lot I could. We
were talking a few minutes ago, and the part that was so moving to me was that evidently there are stages along the way for getting breakthroughs about this or getting over it where you were going through some old pictures or something, come to terms with your wife. What happened there that needed to happen in order for you to move forward?
Yeah, so after the abortion, I really pretty much shut it out of my mind and really, literally to the point where, it's shameful, but, I ignored all her calls. I quit dealing with her altogether. The last time I saw her, I remember her being curled up on her bed crying. And I kind of pushed all of it out of my mind. And what I kept were pictures of her. And hindsight 2020, I did it as a memorial in some senses. But, after years down the line, I was going through premarital, and I was getting rid of pictures of all my ex-girlfriends and whatnot to say my mind and my heart is focused on this woman here, and I don't need any reminders of anything. And I came across her picture, and I couldn't throw it away. And my wife was like, just throw it in the trash. And I just broke down, I was like, what in the world?
That's the moment.
Yeah, it just literally broke. The guilt and the remorse and the shame of it all. And I think that was actually the beginning of the healing process for me. So.
Confession.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, the song is a powerful testimony of the outworking of God's grace. It sounds to me like the beginning of God's work in your life, started in terms of your awareness when you were a teenager, but really hadn't taken root yet as a powerful force. But through this experience and other forms of growth, you were able to come forth with the story, not only with your wife or the truth with yourself, but with your wife, and then to be able to go to a song about it. Is a pathway for a lot of people. There's 45 million abortions every year. That means about 90 million people every year have this shared experience.
Kind of world or states?
Worldwide.
Wow.
Okay. And now for 20 some years, abortion and the guilt and the regret of it is the most common human experience of our generation.
Wow. I think a lot of people don't realize that that's a common experience or that other people wrestle through that. I think most of the time, I know I did, and some other people that I've known just felt like it was them, alone in that isolated situation. And then I think too is I'm not supposed to be here. I'm the product of two young people coming together outside of marriage and like, and in a lot of poor communities, the thought process is, man, it's already hard enough for us to survive. Now we got this other mouth to feed, but my mother survived. She made it, and we're here. I'm here.
And you have a purpose.
Right, absolutely.
And an influence to give purpose to others as well.
Right. Yeah.
The song, I think, to me, I'm really struck by it because I'm persuaded by the content that it's valuable, but the art form and how it's being communicated is also intriguing to me. And I know you've written a lot of things about saying beautiful things beautifully, or truthful things in ways that arrest or convict, or the word I like to use is sticky, comes from the marketplace. It sticks, I can't get can't get it out of my mind.
That's just true, and that's what most people think of is saying something in a way that sticks. I want to go a step further or deeper, I'm not sure what it is, and say, if you're an artist or preacher or a person who wants to converse and discover truth, trying to say what you know at a beginning level, trying to say it in a impactful way, doesn't just make it sticky, it makes you see more.
Yeah.
It makes you see more. So that, for example, if a pastor or a songwriter wants to feel and see the horror of abortion, one of the best ways to do it is not just stop thinking, okay, horrible, 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 but rather start saying, find a creative way to put the pieces together in a piece of rap music or in a sermon, put them together, and you will see the horror more. That's
Well, can I give you an example?
Yes, you may.
Some years ago, you preached a sermon on James chapter 4, addressing the sanctity of human life. And you said something that was sticky for me. You said, all abortion is a substitute for prayer. Do you remember saying that?
Only because I read your email. I don't remember most of what I preached. But go ahead.
It's not.
I can imagine what I
Okay.
might mean by it.
And it helped me understand, you talk about being able to see.
Yeah.
All abortion is a substitute for prayer, based on James chapter 4, in which you were saying, what causes wars and fighting among you? You have something, you don't have it, so you kill. You don't have because you don't ask God.
That's pretty good.
That's good. He could have preached in this, claim that as his own sermon.
I've told a lot of people that without necessarily pointing to you, so maybe,
Here's a general thing I would draw out of that observation. I think a lot of teachers, pastors, artists don't want to touch this with a 10-foot pole because a lot of reasons. One reason is, well, what new can you say about this? It's halfway meaningful, Right. And they don't stop and say, what are the roots that are feeding this? And there are dozens of them: fear and greed and lust and prayerlessness and unbelief and being unwilling to suffer and pastors can get all over that. Artists can get all over that. You don't need more statistics up here and just talking about, okay, what's happening, how bad is it, but rather, where's it coming from? And that's what the gospel and the Bible, it's just all over the Bible, roots of these kinds of sins. Whether it's racism or whether it's abortion, if you go beneath the actual phenomenon, it can be talked about forever.
Yeah, and Lecrae, you asked me earlier about whether your experience was kind of a narrow experience or the broad experience. And I can tell you, having been involved directly in the startup of 9 pregnancy help medical clinics in several major cities in this country and overseas, your experience is by far the most common experience in which you sort of recognize the truth on one side, but you suppress it because it doesn't fit in with the plans.
Yeah.
And also the ambivalence that she felt.
Yeah.
I don't want to do this. I do want to do this.
Yeah.
This is where people's human experience of abortion is being played out.
Yeah.
And where matters of faith then come into play, and matters of neighborly love can make a big difference. It'd be interesting to know in the sovereignty of God what would have happened if you had turned to a pregnancy help clinic at that hour.
If I even knew what that was
Yeah.
back then.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean,
I'm actually curious to know y'all's perspective on, I think, and some of the reason why I think for years, even after coming to grips with what I had done, not wanting to say anything or not wanting to speak about it. I literally had to call my mother before I put this album out to let her know this had happened. She didn't even know. But I wonder y'all's perspective because, here is literally the pregnancy, the abortion clinic was around the corner from her house, disenfranchised, poor urban community. And so I would always feel like, I think the reality is a lot of people are, concerned about just their own personal future and how they're gonna make it, or, what people are gonna think of them. And, a lot of the issues of self-interest that you bring up, there's always this pushback of, well, no, there's issues of, health complications and you can't speak it. Because as far as I'm concerned, in my experience of my friends and my own personal experience, it's never been about a health issue. It's always been about my self-interest, and it's your life or mine. And really, at the end of the day, I think, people will create, oh, well, it's not really a life, or it's a fetus, or whatever it may be, in order to keep themselves shielded from the issue of dressing. I'm really just choosing my life over yours. But then some people will say, no, there's health, or there's, and I just wonder from a spiritual or ethical perspective, y'all's perspective on that as well.
Yeah. Well, you're absolutely right that the health issues are camouflage. I mean, that is a ruse. That's a cloud that's put up because statistically, giving birth to babies is safer than abortions. That's not going to play out. The socioeconomic issues, the lifestyle issues, the education issues, the my future issues carry the day. And then there are some other pretty sophisticated other kinds of justice issues that are brought up. I mean, the most moving thing I ever experienced was taking an abortionist out to lunch, Bill Long, and prepared to tell him he's killing babies. He said, I know I'm killing babies.
Wow.
And I said, so what do we need to discuss? He said, my wife insists that I do this for justice reasons. I said, explain. And he said, look, two people have sex. Guy gets off scot-free. She's stuck with the baby. That's unequal and unjust. One way to fix that injustice.
Wow.
Abortion. It's a justice issue for many people. So that's how complicated it can get in the justification. It's the health issues aren't really there. And beneath that is just really the man's issue. Like, you can't walk away. Yeah. We must not let that guy walk away. We don't say it's her problem. It's y'all's problem. Yeah. It's the two of you problem. In fact, I was so moved just a few minutes ago when you were talking about your background. You said, we had an abortion. I almost wanted to cry at the rightness of that statement. So I think you're right on that the kinds of excuses that are brought up are generally not they're not the issue. This is in my way. This is in my way.
When this issue came up in my church in Boston, it became pretty clear to me that most women have abortions to please a man, or because they feel the abandonment of the man in their life, and unable to go forward alone. But it's still somewhat man-dependent, which is the irony of what you're saying, John, is that in terms of justice, it's more men favor legal abortion than women do, because we see some of the ways to be sexually predatory and clean up the messes and walk away. But nonetheless, it affects men and women, and leaves a deep scar and a pain, and it's part of our job as salt and light in our culture to bring the gospel to the sin of abortion, and to clarify what it is, and to offer practical help so people can escape it. And so the church has been involved a lot in the last 40 years, and so we've got some areas that we've made some progress on. I want to go over a couple of those places that we've made some progress on. I have my little flashcards, okay? Here's number one. 1.6 million, 1.0 million. Back in the 1990, there were about 1.6 million abortions a year in America. Last year, for which we have data, 1 million. That's a pretty significant drop in America, even though the populations continued to grow. Number 2, 2,176 and 551. In 1990, there were 2,176 surgical abortion businesses operating in the United States. Today, there are 551.
Wow.
Number 3, in 1990, there were about 700 pregnancy help ministries that had been started by the Christian communities around the country. That's my estimate based on my interviewing some of the leaders back in the early 90s. Today, Heartbeat International says that they have records of 2,452 pregnancy help ministries or clinics operating in the United States right now.
And for clarification, wouldn't it be right to say most of those are Christian?
Yes, I don't know of any that would identify themselves as secular. So predominantly Catholic or predominantly evangelical, in some cases collaborating together.
Yeah.
But all of this is a reflection of a Christian response to the agony and the violence of abortion.
Wow.
So that the people who, they don't say it anymore maybe, but used to say it when I was on the streets, they'd say, why don't you do something besides march out here? Why don't you do something for the mom? Why don't you do something for the baby? You're just out here putting your sexual ethic on us. And I'll take this statistic now, I mean, I have for years, and say, look, it's the church that has cared for mom. Church has cared for baby.
Yeah. Wow. That's powerful.
But just like in the racial discussions, you can talk about how far have we come, how far do we need to go. There's some how far do we need to go statistics I need to share also. Okay, here's 2 of them. The way we stand right now, African Americans make up 12.5% of the population. They suffer 30% of all the abortions.
It's ridiculous. And I have thoughts on that, but anyway.
Our Hispanic or Latino communities, they make up 13% of the population. They have another 25% of all abortions.
Yeah.
And so the abortion industry has become an urban movement. That's why the one that was closest, was right around the corner.
Yeah.
That's why I went to Miami, because they had 37 abortion businesses in Miami, and almost all of them were in the predominantly black and Hispanic communities of Miami. That's why I went down there. Okay. The best data that we have is from New York City. This is what it reveals. In New York, 25% of the population are African Americans. They have 46% of all the abortions. The Latino community is 28% of the population. They have 31% of all abortions. White community is 44%, they have 12.5%. What that really means to me, among other things, is that the pro-life movement in practice is also an urban movement. It's working primarily with minorities more and more and more and more. And so when we talk what you were talking about in the waiting room, about this convergence of racial issues and the life issues, what this indicates to me is that victory or the end of the abortion business is over as soon as the black community stands up and rejects it the way the midwives of Egypt did.
So you said 30 seconds ago, I got thoughts about that.
Yeah.
I hear one or 2 of them.
Yeah, I think, obviously you have to look at, the history as well, and just seeing how there was an initial target on these communities to rid, the country of ethnic minorities. And then now there's the work to be done in terms of an educational process, because I think there's a lot of people in the black and Hispanic communities like myself who were just unaware of any other method or any other program or any other way out other than this. And it was an easy fix. And And there's not a lot of education. Like I really did not think at the time, outside of the implication internally that this is not okay, I didn't think, it was kind of easier for me to say, well, I don't know if this is a person. I don't know what the facts or the science behind this is. I just know that this is what's offered here. And there were pamphlets and stuff that, eased our internal debate. But I think there's something to, the least adopted children in America are black babies, right now, right? There's something to, I know because of the financial situation in the urban communities, it's kind of like, man, what am I supposed to do here? How do I handle this? And I've got scores and scores of family members who are single women, and I think it's a bigger issue of, of men and standing up and saying, man, I'm going to be a dad, and I'm going to take leadership, and I'm going to be a force in my community to break a lot of these cycles. But there has to be, in terms of the church holistically, right? Like we can't just say, well, we're one body, one race when it's controversial. We have to be one body, one race and go to every end of the earth and every community to do this kind of work, and not just say, well, we're one race when, one side of us is being indicted, but when it's your problem, then it's your problem, right? Like it's all of our issue as the church. And I think that's something that needs to happen. And that's why I wanted to speak out. That's why I wanted to say something, because I think there is a lack of leadership. There's a lack of visible leadership saying, this is not okay. And so.
Well, thank you for your effort in the song. I can tell you the reason that I was so personally moved by it was it gave me hope.
Yeah.
Here's a young, rising voice within the urban community, speaking confessionally, but clearly about the sanctity of human life, and Heartbeat was destroyed, and under the larger umbrella of your testimony of God's grace. But these are the voices. The Stand for Life movement needs to become more and more of an urban movement, because that's where the problem now is focused and concentrated. And some people will say historically it started out that way, growing out of eugenics movement. I get all that. But wherever the problem is the greatest, we need to bring the greatest resources.
Absolutely.
And they need to come externally, but also within the community. And your voice comes from within the community. It comes naturally, not contrived, not forced. It's your testimony, but it's prophetic, and it's an encouragement, because it gives opportunity for many other young men to say, I walked that path. Now tell me, how did you get past it? And now you're married, and you're committed to your children, and you're standing tall as a godly man. You have a vision for being a husband and a father. You represent where I need to get to. That's powerful stuff.
It's possible stuff. And I think that's what a lot of people have to understand is it's possible. It's not an impossibility. It's very feasible. It's what God has called you to be. It's, and if He's called you to something, He'll equip you, to be what He's called you to be. He's called you to be, a responsible, faithful, diligent leader, as a man, and He'll equip you to do that, and He's equipped me to do that. I never would have imagined I'd have the resources, the understanding, or any of the things that I, have now, but by the grace of God, I'm here, and
by the grace of God, all three of us are here.
Exactly.
John, the last thing I want to really mention is, there's a lot of discussion going on right now in the country about racial justice and the events that happened in Ferguson and New York City. And it's ongoing, and it's caused a lot of demonstrations, but a lot of quiet conversations and so on and so forth. Where does the sanctity of life issue and the racial issue, how do they come together for you? What's the cross points?
Oh my. I'm tempted to go in 3 or 4 different directions. You got to start with the fact that if Jesus is Lord, he's Lord over life. Life lived relationally, horizontally, with every tribe and tongue and people and nation for whom he bled, and life related to your children that you beget, which you should love with all your heart. So the gospel trains us in godliness in those horizontal and depth family and community relationships. There's a message of wholeness and life and peace and justice and beauty. It's rooted in who Christ is in living and dying and rising for us. That's the necessary place to start, that the gospel is the foundation of racial harmony, racial peace, reconciliation, and the gospel is the foundation of overcoming all the selfishness that tempts me to take my child's life. But here's something that I think is almost as immediately relevant, because I think if the church doesn't speak with conviction and with power from the pulpits about both of these issues, then neither of them will make the progress that they should. And when I talk to people about why abortion is not addressed, and I did recently at this confab we had in Nashville, which was on race, and yet abortion came up, and some people thought that, well, we do fine with abortion, we don't do well with race. And I thought, excuse me, we don't do well with either of these. Right. We don't do well with either of these. And when I asked some young pastors who have thriving churches, so why aren't the pastors around you addressing this like you do? And there are reasons like abortion is kind of a white, middle-class Republican issue. Race is cool. It's more PC. So to address that, now, it would be exactly opposite depending on where you are, but there's some young pastors who don't want to touch abortion for that reason, others who don't want to touch race for that reason. And I think what I tried to do for 18 years was take that providence of January, Martin Luther King birthday, Sanctity of Life Sunday. They have to come back to back. Right. God did that. Right. Nobody did it. God did that. So here you got a Republican issue and a Democratic issue. And if a pastor, my point is, a pastor can free himself from any kind of partisan accusation. Oh, you're just right wing, you're just Republican, or you're just Democrat, you're just lockstep with the black community or whatever. No, I'm not, because I'm going to offend you on one Sunday, I'm going to offend the others on the other Sunday, because I'm a kingdom guy. Yeah. I am a kingdom guy. So I just long for those two issues to just go right together in the preaching of the pastors. I just think it would give incredible authenticity to many churches and many pastors if they got serious about both issues together, rather than choosing, well, we'd be an anti-abortion church, and we'll be an anti-racism church. Yeah. Let's just be pro-life wholeness, relationally, and pro-life wholeness with our little ones in our wombs.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both for finding ways to live out that commandment to rescue those who are being dragged off to death and hold back those stumbling to the slaughter. Pretty powerful word, also picture word, right? And for finding ways through your art, through your preaching, teaching, writing. And I suspect that you're going to be involved or already involved with a lot of other outreaches within the community. But all of this is the outflow of the fact that God has changed our lives and called us to the good works that he prepared for us long ago to do, with the hope that we get to contribute to the advancement of a kingdom in which life thrives and develops in his kingdom. So thank you for your courage and your compassion. And it'll be interesting to track and see what the next couple of years and decades unfold for you in the hip-hop world and as a Christian man.
Amen. I'm grateful.
And John, as they do in the city.
We didn't even rehearse that.
Do you need to rehearse it?
Well, I can make a fool of myself pretty easily.
I appreciate you as well. Thank you for the opportunity. You know, I think my prayer is that people will find healing and not be ashamed to know that that confession is not the end of the world, and it actually brings healing.
Yeah.
I am so, I'm sitting here whispering my prayer to God. Help us to end on this note, because you said something so powerful a few minutes ago in the other room, and you echoed it, that a confession of what happened is such a liberating thing for others to come forward. Mm-hmm. And if they don't come out of the darkness, then they can't have the sweetness of forgiveness. And that's what the gospel does teach us how to live, but it rescues us when we fail to live where we're supposed to live. And that's what makes it sweet. And so the fact that you've been so public, had to call your mom on the phone and had to throw away an old girlfriend's picture and have to weep in front of your wife, that story should release men and women from a lot of shadows that are so enslaving. Because the gospel is healing.
I've been involved with a lot of things I'm very excited about, starting pregnancy centers and so on and so forth, but everything that I've been involved in got, the moment it started with somebody's tears of confession. I had an abortion. I've come to regret it. Let me tell you my story. And it has just it's just released not only others from the past, but it's released passion and drive and money and wherewithal to say we can do something about this. So thank you again, and may God give you other ways to continue to give your testimony.